having no ambition or no goals, that's the failure of life. That's the calamity. That's the sin, is to have no stars to reach for, to have no goal to fight for. And so
Learning to swim is about learning from others. Be the author of your own story, not a character in somebody else's story. Get inspired by others to take action. Learn how to set goals to exceed your own expectations. So often the answer that you are looking for is right in front of you. On Learning to Swim, we highlight those answers through storytelling. Hello, Brantly. How are you?
I'm doing great, Kristan. How are you?
I am doing really, 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 really well. So well that I can't even say it. Thank you so much. I know. Oh, Fridays, I tell you. Thank you so much for joining me on Learning to Swim. This is where I get to reach out to other professionals and talk about their professional journey, personal journey, how those things intertwine. Also, we hit on bright spots and blind spots and a few other random questions. You have not been prepped with the questions, so you're getting these fresh, and that's kind of part of the intent too, is just to have a spontaneous conversation. And just for your, I always kind of chuckle because most of these questions were crafted pre-COVID, and I find them kind of interesting to revisit them now in the time of COVID. I want to introduce you, Brantly Fulton. You originally are from Michigan. You're local here to Los Angeles now. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it sounds like, so you were saying that you grew up in a relatively rough neighborhood, definitely with drugs, crime, crime-related activities nearby. You were very fortunate. You mentioned that growing up in your family and the care and love that your family showed you really supported you. And it sounds like too, because you got your PhD at the University of Oregon in chemistry, and your dissertation focused around aluminum cluster chemistry. Now, we'll talk more about that because I find that very, very interesting and completely out of my scope of study. But I guess I want to jump right in. Well, first I want to say what you are. At the moment, you have a company that's called LAMAR, and that is, tell me a little bit more about LAMAR first, and what are you doing over there?
Yeah, absolutely. So LAMAR, we're a cold chain logistics company, and our focus is, we have a really grand challenge of creating a zero emission planet. And so we want to be able to reduce the carbon footprint globally. And the way that we do that is through cold chain logistics tracking. And in terms of cold chain, we mean any type of products that are temperature controlled or need to be kept at cold conditions as they move throughout their supply chain. So one of the things, as you begin to create better hardware, in terms of we're using flexible sensors in a collaboration with the lab at UC Berkeley, and the predictive analytics model that we're building inside of LAMAR will be able to get to damages and temperature excursions faster in real time. And as a result of that, we'll be able to cut down on cost, waste, and supply chain inefficiencies that lead to bottlenecks that, for instance, that's why the 405 freeway is as busy as it is. And so we're really excited about this mission and this purpose, and we're really focused on building it right here in LA.
Well, that's fantastic. I want to hear more about it. I want to kind of circle back to where you grew up, and and then the transition to, I guess to getting a PhD. Like, how does that happen? I mean, how did it happen for you? You mentioned how supportive your family is.
Yeah, I think having a supportive family, I think to be honest, some of the things that you saw in the neighborhood that I grew up in, you didn't want to become that, or in terms of the opportunities, some of the opportunities were so few or so limited. And so, seeing, I think, beyond, a basketball court, or seeing beyond entertainment, I think it was tough to kind of see beyond that in those type of places. For me, one of the things, I think the universe kind of works in a miraculous way at times, because while I was seeing and envisioning, those scenes as a kid, I was also, playing in the dirt, and I think becoming a discoverer and an explorer. And I was really fascinated with bugs and critters and worms. I was really into biology at the time when I was a lot younger. And as I went through school and in high school, I really got into chemistry, I think, actually because a lot of the colors, I was really big into art at the time, and I liked the shapes of molecules and the colors that they would color them. And so it was kind of this world that it seemed really artistic. It had this kind of sort of scientific expression behind it. And as you dig deeper, I think, into chemistry, you begin to understand, that the entire world around us is all, is shaped by chemistry. Atoms make up molecules, and molecules make up real world things, whether it's a chair that we're sitting in, a table, down to, the foods that we eat. And so one of the things about chemistry is that it's fascinating because every day is so elusive. It's always changing. New molecular and molecule discovery is happening every day. And, as a result, that changes the time course. But I think for me, it was, I think for me, it was really kind of in my neighborhood and the environment that I grew up in, and learning to be a discoverer and learning to be an explorer really gave me a lot of innate, I would say, scientific skills that really helped me develop kind of building blocks of the scientific method. And that's kind of an approach I use both in my personal and I think in professional life as a scientist.
Oh, thank you. I love hearing that. And I'm curious, what does resilience mean to you, or what does it look like to you? And both, kind of historically, maybe over your lifetime, and then maybe more specifically around our current situation.
Yeah, I think, I think resilience is really about kind of accepting who you are, accepting where you are, and always having that hope and that push, that fight, the grit for a better future, for a better planet. There's certain sayings, my parents would always tell me when I was younger, leave the room better than when you arrived in it. If something, whether that's putting, something away, whether that's being a voice or hope to the hopeless, providing a word of encouragement. So to me, resiliency is rooted in the idea of never giving up on your dream, never giving up on your passions. There's a quote from Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays, and he was the sixth president of Morehouse College and mentor to Martin Luther King Jr. And one of the things that Dr. Mays would always say is that, having no ambition or no goals, that's the failure of life. That's the calamity. That's the
Mm.
sin, is to have no stars to reach for, to have no goal to fight for. And so, resiliency, I think, historically has been about, facing an uphill battle and having the courage, having the faith, having the belief to persist through it. When we talk about these times, there's never probably been a greater need, to be resilient. I think both in terms of, in 2020, we find ourselves in a global pandemic.
Yeah.
And, that was brought upon as a health crisis, whereas, when we think back to the impact around 2007, 2008, that impacted us very much so. And that was just more economically and financially focused.
Right.
So the impact is even greater in 2020, because not only have our financial and economic institutions been disrupted, but also our health has, because it is a health crisis, and so the recovery time and the recovery modes will be longer probably than expected. But I think that's where being resilient is important. I think there's a lot of civil and social unrest that, to be specific about, that
Mm-hmm.
existing in America. And there's a certain resiliency that's needed when you speak about new reform, and we speak about the institutions in America and how they need infrastructural changes to really be the society and the free country that we all, idolize, and, we see for ourselves, but we also see, this future country that we want to be sustainable for our children to live in.
Well, and you identify as a Black man. You shared that with me, and so in such, when you look at, I mean, I guess I in some ways I'm just at a loss for words, because it feels like, from my viewpoint, you've already had to be so resilient for so long. And just as a member of being Black in America. And then, and certainly I think that there have been so many failures along the way in terms of, legislature and leadership for the Black communities. And I do feel like we have this momentum right now with the conversations that are happening, and really it feels like, I hope at least, that it's impossible for anyone to ignore who lives in the United States at this moment. What would be, where do we go from here? I mean, what would be something that you feel like, how do we continue to have the conversation in a meaningful way, as we move past, we unfortunately, I mean, we have these daily tragedies happening, and so how does the conversation can continue, and then and I also know, like, beyond conversation, how do we stay in action?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And just to give an example, I think from my own life as a as a founder and an entrepreneur, when you look at the statistics, it's around 1%. Only 1% of venture capital funding goes to African Americans in the United States. And so, when you and it's these type of statistics that what really is required to change, you know, environments and societies. You know, if you want to change the, if you want to change the, if you want to change the violence in a city like Chicago or Baltimore, you know, it starts at the top. It starts at economic building and wealth building and economic improvement. You know, we can put in place, I think, laws around, you know, police regulation and police reform, but until we go into those neighborhoods, into those communities, and provide better economic and sustainable economic models where, you know, people can live, work, play, earn a job, or earn an income in the same neighborhood, then these types of problems will continue to persist. So I think it's really about, you know, how do we invest economically into these types of neighborhoods to actually build out communities. You know, Dr. Claude Anderson, and he's famous for a number of reasons, one of which he has a book called Powernomics. But, you know, one of the things that he talks about, you know, even if we change or try to change school reform or police reform surrounding police brutality, all of those things are inherently linked to economics. And so we first have to change the economics, and there first has to be close the kind of inequality and these kind of economic wealth gaps to be able to then do these higher level, higher order things such as police reform and having representatives who reflect, you know, what the community looks like, having legislative representatives that are from, you know, local communities. You know, at the end of the day, it requires strong economics to run a successful campaign. I mean, so, you know, until you plant those drivers and those infrastructures, and you make them sustainable within these communities, there's forever going to be a problem by you know, trying to put a Band-Aid on larger problems.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. You mentioned, I want to shift back a little bit more focused on you specifically. You mentioned as a child being, it sounded like you were very observant, taking in your surroundings, and also very curious about the world and both the micro playing in the dirt and the world around you. How do you maintain your curiosity as an adult? Like because I find that to be such an important part of being a business owner. And also I think that's where kind of a lot of the gems come out in terms of the work that we do. So how do you remain curious?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say there's a number of avenues. You know, I think, you know, even after finishing a PhD, I think, you know, it's easy to kind of get to this endpoint and you go, oh, you know,
right.
I'm Dr. Fulton now, you know, but the reality is, you know, the learning never stops. And so I think one way is to always be learning something, to always, you know, be pushing education forward. The other, I think, is you know, engaging in true hobbies. You know, we all have jobs. You know, we all have to provide for, you know, ourselves and feed our families. But I think it's also important to engage in hobbies that you just purely, you know, you purely perform it for the love, you know, for the love of doing it. And I think that really helps foster curiosity. It allows you to be creative. It allows you to be in a space where you have something that you're passionate about, you know, that has a never ending point, you know. So for me, you know, some of those things are film, photography. I'm really involved I used to actually be a chess coach
Oh,
when I was in college at Morehouse, and you know, I still love to play, you know, with friends or family, and so you know, I think really being engaged with things that you enjoy doing is a way to be curious. You know, and one of the things I feel is as we get older, you know, society has a way. I think friends and family and personal relationships have a way of you know, making a person feel guilty, you know, for being
oh
curious,
yeah.
or, you know, still having you know, these childlike curiosities or visions or ideas or dreams. And one of the things I think as a person is never losing that, you know, of you know, going back in the mind and, you know, placing yourself saying, you know, when I was 7, when I was 8 years old, you know, what did I just enjoy doing? You know, what are the things that are just fun to me? And I think as you get older in life and, you know, responsibilities pick up and, you know, life gets serious, there always has to be a fight for that, to keep that inner spirit, to keep that inner child alive. I think that pushes a person forward.
Oh, I agree. Yes, and I do think that a lot of times our kind of our day to day, and especially as we take on more responsibilities as adults, yeah, that we can kind of lose that we just we get out of practice of kind of finding awe and wonder in the world around us. Speaking of your childhood, can you remember a particular story or book that you loved, that was either read to you or that you read when you were younger?
Yeah, there's certainly a few. Certainly around the holidays and Christmas, there were, you know, all of the holiday books. I think you know, having my you know, my mother, she would read, you know, the 12 days of Christmas, and every night, you know, 12 days out was, you know, a different you know, was the different day. And I remember those memories, you know, very vividly with my older brother, you know, and us just huddled up, you know, around the family living room. I would say other books that stood out to me. I remember really young. It's like the famous caterpillar book where the caterpillar like eats through the apple. It's like a
Oh, right, right. The
classic.
the hungry, hungry
Yeah,
caterpillar.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You know, it's just I think from the visual and just I mean I remember that book just over and over again as very, you know, at a very young age. I think I'm an avid
Well, in that book, I mean, that book has the way, if anyone doesn't know it, it's Eric, is it Carl or Car? It's K, or it's spelled with a Carle. So I think it's Eric Carl, but he did that, and that kind of goes back to what you were saying about the colors of
mhm.
the molecular structures, because if I remember correctly, the illustrations in that book were almost like kind of dots connected
They were, yeah,
together.
exactly. Yeah, there's greens and reds
Oh yeah.
that stand out. Yeah, and so I think that's one. Yeah, probably. You know, most chemists, I would say, most scientists in general, are kind of self-proclaimed visual learners.
Wow.
Um, so those types of books, and I think it really kind of aids us in, you know, when we think about molecules, a lot of that is you know, what we're envisioning, you know, in our head or in our mind. You know, when you haven't made a certain structure, or you've never performed this reaction, so a lot of it is a thought experiment around,
Mm.
well, what do I envision this molecular, you know, arrangement to look like. And so I think because of that, we're really strong visual learners. Um, Other books that I think stood out to me when I was younger, I really like the book, and one of my all-time favorites is the book The Giver. Um,
Mm.
and I think the messaging, I think the story, how it all comes full circle. You know, that was when I really remember kind of as you kind of transition and you get, a little older, that was an
Well,
impact.
for people who may not have read that, share kind of what your the lesson or the takeaway from that for you was.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So you have this society where kind of almost in a 1984 or Fahrenheit, is it four? I always get the number 457.
For 451?
451. I always get the number confused. I think it is 451. You have a stripped down society where it's trying to create a society that almost appreciates, where everyone can appreciate each other. It kind of borderlines on these socialist aspects, but it's how do we remove the material world? And again, this kind of gets at the point of how do we reduce kind of the inequalities to come together as this oneness, and it follows the leader who is almost perceived as like God or the God, and it's his whole purpose is just purely based and rooted in giving, and it has kind of this contrast that through his continuous giving, it's like he almost gets overfilled with giving to the point where he himself kind of self decays or self erupts, and I think it's just it's an interesting kind of juxtaposition or point, and I think it has some real world kind of examples, because sometimes I think part of the story is to say that a lot of life is about self fulfillment and making yourself happy first, and not seeking the validation or happiness from others. And the other, I think, is humans sometimes they go on this search for kind of this never-ending satisfaction, or how can you give enough, or being happy with giving without getting. And so that's kind of the basic, I think, premise for the book, and that's why I think it's an interesting.
Oh, it's a wonderful book. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it still is. I believe I know that for my own children, it still was assigned reading, so it's still out there, and it is a really, really good book. Well, what is so? I think I have an opinion on this, but what would you say your in plain sight talent is? So what is something that people who know you and even may know you for a relatively short amount of time can see right away?
I'm curious what yours is, and I guess maybe after I say, I'll get to hear from you.
Sure, I'll share mine or my thoughts on yours. Yes.
Right. I would say that most of my friends, most of my family would say that I have a charismatic type of personality, and that I would say that they would say that I'm a happy person that is always kind of pushing the boundary or pushing for an advanced idea or advanced thought, or and I would say a risk taker. That's kind of a classic trait, I think, of entrepreneurs.
Oh, absolutely.
To be a successful entrepreneur, you definitely have to take risk and go against the grain. And I think even sometimes, your support systems, they might think that idea A, is the best idea for you. And, you might say, well, I'm really committed to idea B, and, my passions are around that, and I want to explore and push that further. So, I would say charismatic. I would say risk taker, or I would say those are probably towards the top of that list.
Well, I think what I would say is, and one thing that I really appreciate about you is just how well you know yourself. There's a lot of I perceive you is you have a really good sense of yourself, and also you're comfortable in that sense of yourself, and which I think actually allows for these other attributes that you've described. I mean, I think they all go together. You know, I believe you are charismatic because, again, you know, you know yourself, and you're comfortable. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I definitely, I would agree. I would agree with that, and I think you're absolutely right in the fact that being comfortable with myself does allow, I think, the, you know, both the focus and opportunities. You know, it allows me to, I think, better understand, you know, things that I do want to do, things that are within my wheelhouse, things that I have the time for, the capacity that's in my science knowledge background. You know, all of these things. I think
Yeah.
uh, you can manage it, and it becomes, I think, easier as a result of that.
Yeah, for sure. So then, what would be a hidden talent that you would be willing to share with us?
Hidden talent.
Well,
Let's see.
maybe hidden to us.
um, I would say some of the hidden talents are really, really around my business pursuits. You know, you know, as an entrepreneur, you know, because I come from a very deep, you know, science background. Well, I guess that's not a hidden talent though, since I'm entrepreneur. I guess that's kind of more of a frontline talent. Maybe music. I One of the things that when I was younger, I was in like the band. And I played saxophone, and I think kind of one of my life, you know, if it were on kind of a bucket list or, you know, at the end of my life type of thing, one of them I would say is like mastering a musical instrument. And so I'm a lover of music, and for me, I think there's a couple of different options. Maybe like a bass guitar, or like,
Yeah.
and then since I do come from like a woodwind, like a saxophone, I always have had a appreciation for the horn. So like a bass clarinet, or you know, even like a trumpet or a baritone, or something like that. I think, and just mastering, you know, an instrument, I think is something that would be fun and novel.
That would be great. I know. I would. Uh, Eons ago, I played the flute and not very well, and so yes, I do have that. It would be so nice to master an instrument. But tell me a little bit too about kind of what you think is one of your, and it doesn't have to be hidden, or, but just one of the things that is unique about how you approach building a business. Your brand, like your kind of secret sauce of entrepreneurship.
I would say I would say it's patience. I would say I'm
Mm.
deceptively patient.
Ah.
And you know, and you know, I think for some people that's like, I think for some people it's hidden because it seems, I think that that's not easy to see on the, you know, on the surface. You know, I
Right.
had, when I was in graduate school, I had my first patent when I was 23. I finished my PhD at 28, you know,
Wow.
and so, you know, really, I think, you know, even for myself, at a lot of times, I think for a lot of other people, right, it's like this idea, you know, of moving through life fast, or moving, you know, through things quickly. And so I think, you know, one way has been I think, is having the patience through all of that, and being patient through all of that, and patient with all of those processes. And one of the things, you know, as an entrepreneur, and I would say deceptively patient, I think almost can be in an agonizing way at times is, with the team around me. And, when you have a small startup, it's moving at light year speed where, there's a million things to get done, from funding and raising capital to operations on the inside. For us, we're a technology company, so building out the technology infrastructures. And so, in wanting all those things, to move at 1,000,000 miles a minute, and, the responsibility for the team and the access that they have to me, and wanting things to get done, at this rapid speed, I think just being so patient and enjoying the process, I think has actually, it's made it more comfortable and it's made it more enjoyable. And I think in kind of the flip side is actually allowed to get to wins and to get to gains, I think faster, because, so many times it's like, it's really easy, I think, to want to move so fast and be so focused on, that result or that destination, or,
Oh, yeah.
did I meet the goal? And I think in a lot of that, it's easier to get tripped up. And I think by being patient and just, being relaxed and taking the time, and allowing yourself to have that time, I think progress moves more consistently. And then when you look up, you go, oh, we met this milestone, or this goal was achieved, or this goal was met. And so that's the one that I would, I would say that I think through all those things, I would say that there are times where my patience, I think, has annoyed people. And I find that, I find it really funny, and I find it interesting.
That is funny. Well, so speaking of your team, because the work that I do is very focused on employee productivity and engagement, how do you, kind of what's your insight into keeping your team engaged in a, a meaningful way?
Yeah, I think one of the first things, and this is probably this probably will also come off as a surprise, is I think the first important thing is to keep them rested. It's really,
yes.
and I think especially, during pandemic, and, where so many of us are trapped inside, where it's like our home is our work, is our office, is our rest area. And so I think staying rested, is really important, so that when you do engage in kind of, these high level activities inside of a company, that you're excited to do the work that you're doing, that you can attack it, with the fuel and with a certain passion. And the other thing I think is,
well, let me ask you quickly in terms of, so do you have a policy in place that, supports that directive? So what comes to mind for me is, do you not do emails or text messages after a certain hour? Or, are weekends pretty sacred in terms of time off? Or is there a kind of a formal policy around rest, or how do you support that for your team?
Yeah, I would say, in terms of the team, every Wednesday this summer, we started kind of the summer series of, a team building and professional development workshop series. And this series it's really been about kind of coming together and talking about more of our interpersonal lives. And so, to put it simply, very few things during these sessions are discussed around the actual, work tasks that we have to accomplish, but more interpersonal around the person. So we talk about mental health, we talk about wellness, we talk about the power of happiness and the why, and why we do things, and how to be passionate, in the in the workplace. For myself, I would say, a startup, most people would say, well, a startup, you're supposed to work 16 hours a day for
Right.
7 days a week. And, that kind of model, the reality is it's not sustainable
Yeah.
to have a model like that. Anyone who is an entrepreneur, to try to keep that going, you will experience burnout. For myself, I think is one way that helps is, like you say, having a consistent schedule. One of the things that really helps for me is when I do have to take meetings, I try not to take very many meetings, after 3 or 4 p.m. in the afternoon, just to give myself, that mental rest, that mental break. I don't want to be sitting in a meeting at 5 o'clock, not
Oh,
engaged.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
more, yeah, I think, it's more important to push that meeting, to the next day if it has my full attention, full cooperation. In terms of the weekend, spending time with friends, or family, I at least try to take one day throughout the week where it's a completely hands-off, kind of hands-free day where I'm not really doing anything related to or engaged with the company. And that's from, answering, sending emails, calls with some of our clients or partners. So I think those type of things, kind of keep me refreshed. And I think learning from a lot of people that I look up to in this space as well. When we were modeling LAMAR, I was really fascinated by Yvon Chouinard, and he's the founder
Patagonia.
of Patagonia, and he wrote a book called "Let My People Go Surfing."
Mm-hmm.
And this book is is really about giving his employees, for people I guess that don't know, Patagonia is based in Ventura, California, and it's right off the beach. And it was his purpose and his mission to build their first facility close to the beach. He himself is a avid hiker and border surfer.
Right.
And so, one of the things was so that it became employee policy that you come into this office when you need to. If noon calls and you want to go surfing. We want you here when you're at your best, and when you're focused on this work. And if there are these other areas and more freedom within your daily life or your daily schedule. And I think that Patagonia was really we're hearing about more of these models now. I think in 2020, as the pandemic has happened and more work is going remote and virtual, allowing for more flexibility in schedules. But Patagonia, I think, was really a pioneer in this kind of work balance lifestyle kind of
absolutely
culture type of companies. And so I think looking kind of to models like that is also important, and also something that we do at LAMAR.
Well, and I think too, what I believe, I can't remember the exact study, but companies that elect to give their employees pretty much the freedom to take time off whenever, like not saying, oh, you've got 2 weeks of vacation every year, or you've got this many sick days every year, but companies that choose to do a much more flexible model that really empowers the employees to take the time off as they need it. I mean, I believe that the research overwhelmingly supports the fact that people don't abuse that, and they appreciate it. And and I'm sure that those types of companies also have other added benefits, which it is also allows for the employees to be happier and more content. But just in that specific instance of taking time off or whatever, that it is rarely something that anyone doesn't come in for for days on end.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I
Yeah.
completely, and as as work becomes more and more digitized, and there's such a gray area now between when the workday ends and begins
Yeah.
and ends, and so I think providing those the traditional 9 to 5 workplaces all but non-existent nowadays. And so providing more of that flexibility, I think we'll continue to see as being a needed value add. And I
Right.
think companies in the future will be more successful by adopting more of those models for their employees.
Let me ask you what do you think is, I mean, it sounds like you are doing so many things really, really well. What's that one area that you're still looking to improve when you look at your team and your company and as the founder and as wearing all these different hats?
Yeah, for us, I would say, the majority of our team, myself, I'm a materials chemist. Our CTO, he's a software engineer. A lot of our team, we have 4 undergraduate students, undergraduate student interns, and they're all STEM majors. And so, we're really excited. And I think we're really good, and we really have a good core technology scope. And so, I think for us, in terms of those areas for improvement, or I think where we look for a lot of growth
Mm-hmm.
or opportunity, I think, are in the business operations side, where for us, I think that's for myself, I think that's some of the exciting part is to learn, the business end. I've always, I think, ever since I was a little kid, I've always been a really hard negotiator, and it's something that it's something that I revel in. I take pride enjoying that. I enjoy that business side of it, and so
Yeah.
there's things like learning the operations. I think more, you're always improving upon your business model. So those kind of things are areas of improvement where we're beginning to add those key people around, and we're still looking, I think, for some of that key personnel as well. And so it's fun, I think, to understand and see that kind of as a gap, and
Mm-hmm.
to also be able to learn in that space. But the other thing, as a company begins to grow, it's important for the founders to have more trust, and trust
Right.
in the people around us, that that they're completing their tasks, that they're completing their milestones. So I would say that's kind of one of the areas of improvements around business operations.
Okay. And then our final question, or my final question is, so I like to ask people, what was their very first paid position, whether it was your first job or the first kind of task that you used to get paid for as a kid or young adult. What was that for you?
I've always felt like I was an entrepreneur, where I remember on the way to school, there was like a little corner store, and I sometimes would stop in the corner store and like buy like little candies and chips, and during lunchtime at school, I would like mark it up, like
Yeah.
50 to 100%, and like try to, it was just kind of, I always thought it was a cool idea, even back then, like, hey, I spent $1, $2 on this, can I turn $2 into $4? So I would say, for myself, that was kind of the first, I was young, I would say, maybe 6th, 7th grade, where I just had this desire to kind of like, I thought I was I thought I was in business, and I wanted to kind of make money. When I think about it, a little later, when I was in high school, and again, I had saved up some money, and I had bought a lawnmower from like a flea market. It was actually a really good lawnmower. I had it for I cut grass like probably 2 whole summers with it. But
Wow.
the most interesting thing for me was I think I had cut like 2 different lawns that day that I had bought it, and had already paid the lawnmower off. I had paid the lawnmower off the day that I bought it. And so, it was like, I just thought that that was so cool, to, kind of invest in something and
Mm-hmm.
directly, get that return on it, like in the same day. So it's kind of like those type of things that I think kind of sparked a lot of my curiosity, like as an entrepreneur. But
Well, that's what I was going to ask, is kind of how has that informed what you do currently? And yeah, and it definitely sounds like that entrepreneurial spark was there from the beginning.
yeah, and yeah, I would say, even while I was in graduate school, and I think it was a really I think it's a really odd path to take to say I want to run a business. To get a PhD in chemistry, and the purpose and the reason that you're doing it is to run a business. I think is I would say that's probably I would say in the past that had probably been 99% of not the not the people. But it's some really interesting statistics now. So one of the largest societies for chemists is the ACS, which is the American Chemical Society, and they did a study a couple of years ago, and it looked at PhD graduates across the country. And it was a really shocking statistic, where it was something, I think it was close to I I'll have to get this number. Maybe this will have to be edited later in the video, but
Yeah.
I think that it was somewhere around 60% of uh, like recent PhD chemists in the past like 5 to 10 years had worked in startups,
Mm.
or went to work in a startup after they finished their PhD. And so, it is really a kind of interesting statistic that poses a lot of questions. Where does this come from? What does it mean for academia? What does
Mm.
this mean, for industry? Why is this happening? What is it about the process of, going through and obtaining a PhD that makes someone an easy fit inside of startup, and I think kind of venture capital ecosystems? And so a lot of those questions, I still don't have the answers, to those questions. But
Right.
this is like kind of new, these are new studies that are coming out, and I think they're important because they're going to shape a lot of what we see in terms of the STEM future, where I predict that we'll begin to see more STEM majors that become entrepreneurs and lead business careers. We'll see more scientists in government and in policy in Washington, and voting. We'll be voting for more scientists as senators, and House of Representatives, and Congress members in the future. And so, maybe my own bias, I think as a scientist, I think I'm excited, kind of for that future. But I think that a lot of the emerging problems, and a lot of the solutions that will be required, they will require more and more technology kind of focused approaches. So.
Absolutely. I would agree with you. And I do think it is a very interesting shift. So I look forward to that too. Well, Brantley, thank you so much. I think that's a lot for us that's a great note to leave on, something for us to think on, and we can, we'll have to circle back and see if we get any more data for our next conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thanks so much, Kristan, for the time.
Absolutely. Well, we will have information where you can learn more about Dr. Brantly Fulton in our show notes. And thank you again. Take care. Our goal is to inspire others and share stories to find meaning in your daily life. Let go of the traditional norms and be yourself at home, work, and beyond. The awareness of bright spots and blind spots is a performance-enhancing tool that you can apply to your life and to your organization today.